Srila Prabhupada ki. Grantaraja Srimad Bhagavatam ki. Sri Radha Govinda Deva ki. Gaur Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Gaur Premanandi. Hare Krishna. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narotamam Devim Sarasvatim Vyasam Tatojayam Udirayat Nastapareshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Utamashloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. Reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 10. Dhruva Maharaj's fight with the Yakshas. We are reading today verses 3 through 9 as assigned, and we will chant verse 4 together, which has the most meaningful and substantial purport out of these verses, of which only 2 have a purport. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Anshu, could you sit differently? Because I can't see them. I can sit more this side. That's good. So please be very quiet with the chopping. Thank you. Juvo Bartur Vadam Shutva Kopa Marsha Sucharpita Jinatram Syandanam Astaya Gata Punya Janalayam. No, text 3. Uttamastva Akridvaho Mirgayam Baliyasa Hatta Punya Janas Nadro Tan Matasya Gatim Gata. Dhruva Maharaj's younger brother Uttama, who was still unmarried, once went on a hunting excursion and was killed by a powerful yaksha in the Himalayan mountains. Along with him, his mother Suruchi, who followed the path of her son, she died. Okay, so this is the verse we're going to read together. Dhruva Bartorvadam Shutva Popa Amarsha Sucha Arpita Chaitram Chandanam Astaya Gata Punyajana Alayam. The way that I was trained in the beginning, some 47 years ago, when you give the Bhagavatam class, you read each verse like we just did, one at a time, and then you read one line and back and forth 3 times like that. Not that you read just one thing. This helps everybody to remember and get more clued in better. Dhruva Bartor Vidam Shrutva Kopa Marsa Sucharpita Jaitram Sandanam Astaya Gata Punya Janalayam. Dhruvo Bartor Vidam Shrutva Opa Marsa Sucharpitaha Jaitram Syandanam Astaya Gata Punya Janalayam Juvo Bartor Vadam Shutva Kopa Marsa Sucharpitaha Jaicham Syandanam Astaya Gata Punya Janalayam. Please chant. Dhruva Maharaj, Bhartar Vadam, the killing of his brother. Shutva, hearing this news. Kopa, anger. Amarsha, vengeance. Sucha, lamentation. Arpitaha, being filled with. Chaitram, victorious. Chandanam, chariot. Astaya, getting on. Gata, went. Punya Jana Alayam, to the city of the Yakshas. When Dhruva Maharaj heard of the killing of his brother Uttam by the Yakshas in the Himalayan mountains, being overwhelmed with lamentation and anger, he got on his chariot and went out for victory over the city of the Yakshas, Alakapuri. Please repeat. When Dhruva Maharaj heard of the killing of his brother Uttama by the Yakshas in the Himalaya mountains, being overwhelmed with lamentation and anger, he got on his chariot and went out for victory over the cities of the Yakshas, Alakapuri. Report by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. Dhruva Maharaj is becoming angry, overwhelmed with grief, and envious of the enemies, was not incompatible with his position as a great devotee. It is a misunderstanding that a devotee should not be angry, envious, or overwhelmed by lamentation. Dhruva Maharaj was the king, and when his brother was unceremoniously killed, it was his duty to take revenge against the Yakshas from the Himalayas. Dhruva Maharaj went to the northern direction of the Himalayan range. In a valley, he saw a city full of ghostly persons who were followers of Lord Shiva. Purport in this verse, it is stated that the Yakshas were more or less devotees of Lord Shiva, are more or less. By this indication, the Yakshas may be taken to be the Himalayan tribes like the Tibetans. Maitreya continued, my dear Vidura, as soon as Dhruva Maharaj reached the Lakapuri, he immediately blew his conch shell, and the sound reverberated throughout the entire sky and in every direction. The wives of the Yakshas became very much frightened. From their eyes, it was apparent that they were full of anxiety. O hero Vidura, the greatly powerful heroes of the Yakshas, unable to tolerate the resounding vibration of the conch shell of Dhruva Maharaj, came forth from the city with weapons and attacked Dhruva. Dhruva Maharaj, who was a great charioteer and certainly a great bowman also, immediately began to kill them by simultaneously discharging arrows 3 at a time. When the heroes of the Yakshas saw that all their heads were being thus threatened by Dhruva Maharaj, they could very easily understand their awkward position. And they concluded that they would certainly be defeated. But as heroes, they lauded the action of Dhruva. Purport: the spirit of fighting and a sporting attitude is very significant in this verse. The Yakshas were severely attacked. Dhruva Maharaj was their enemy, but still, upon witnessing the powerful heroic acts of Maharaj Dhruva, they were pleased with him. This straightforward appreciation of an enemy's prowess is characteristic of a real Kshatriya spirit. Om Jnanatam Marandasya Jananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Gadamayam Didati Sva Padantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shiuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raganatam Ditam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakavitam Cha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabando Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Brindavaneshvari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpadrubhyas Cha Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Cha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sadi Gaur Bhakta Brinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. This camera should be slightly moved because this mic stand is like right. It could be like moved to here or something. And the idea is that it gets you can see the deities and the speaker. Okay. Dhruvo Bartor Vidamshutva Kopa Marsha Sucharpitaha Jaitram Syanandanam Astaya Gata Punya Janalayam. When Dhruva Maharaj heard of the killing of his brother Uttam by the Yakshas in the Himalayan mountains, being overwhelmed with lamentation and anger, he got on his chariot and went out for victory over the city of the Yakshas, Alakapuri. So Srila Prabhupada is instructing us in his purport of a very important Krishna Kripa. You're going to have to do more quiet. And also, I can't see Krishna Kripa because Michael could come this way. Thank you. Dhruva Maharaj is becoming angry, overwhelmed with grief, and envious of the enemies was not incompatible with his position as a great devotee. His Holiness Giriraj Maharaj, who was an eyewitness amongst many other of Srila Prabhupada's disciples at one of the original pandals, I believe it was in New Delhi in November 1971. There was 30,000 people present, and there was one young European kind of hippie, kind of druggy kind of motorcycle gang kind of fellow, long hair, and he was like shouting and challenging from the audience, indistinct. And Srila Prabhupada did something which was completely incomprehensible to his disciples in particular. He instructed that a seat be given to him on stage, and he should be ushered up and sit down. And Prabhupada, give him a microphone. And the young man started, "You say the Bhagavad Gita is 5,000 years old, but my sources say it's only 1,000 years old. Answer my question." And Prabhupada would say, "Actually, you answer my question. What is the proper method of hearing the Bhagavad Gita?" He said, "No, I asked you first. You answer. I am not your servant." And it very quickly turned into a shouting match, arguing. And finally, the young man became so threatening, and that we have experienced sometimes out on Harinam. But there in the Delhi Pandal, he was ushered off stage, physically taken off. We wish we could do that too out there, And what happened was that the audience was polarized. And Giriraj Swami, who was, most of the way or midway back in the crowd distributing books, had people coming up to, "Why did Swamiji get angry?" Insinuating this is not the characteristic of a sadhu. Many people got up and left. And it polarized the audience. And Prabhupada's disciples, Giriraj Swami explains, why did Srila Prabhupada do this? They was thinking like this fellow should have been just escorted out of the pandal at the first outburst at the back of the hall. And Prabhupada went on to speak with those remaining, and there was some everybody's talking and chattering and disturbance, and it took time for it to calm down. It said, Tadvidi pranipatena parishpasena sevaya, the proper way to get spiritual knowledge, how to surrender to a saintly person, how to hear from him submissively, render service like that. So what Prabhupada was doing was cutting through this false, obnoxious sentimentality that kind of had settled on the people of India for a long, long time, not really properly understanding their original Vedic culture. The great Maharaj Parikshit, "Who are you in my kingdom herding the cow and the bull, the personification of Dharma and all religious principles? You have no place in my kingdom." He was ready to chop off his head right away. So many examples. So this is a very fine pastime. Here we're hearing how, and Prabhupada is saying, it was not inappropriate was positioned as a great devotee. It is a misunderstanding that a devotee should not be angry, envious, or overwhelmed by lamentation. And we see here in this chapter that Dhruva Maharaj will very, very soundly defeat the Yakshas. So much so that he will keep going, which was considered to be, what is the word, gratuitous, where two opposing parties are fighting, and then the victorious party has clearly won, but they keep going. unnecessarily. Out of all the conflicts and wars in human history, the one that took the most civilian lives, the Battle of Kurukshetra, was done just at Kurukshetra in a field far away from the residential quarters in the city. No civilians were involved. But more civilians than soldiers, and soldiers was a huge number on all sides, was World War II. What the Axis powers, especially Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan, did with civilians, and just in recent times, considerably, 80 years ago, just incomprehensible, made anything that happened in the Middle Ages, Dark Ages, or ancient times, quote unquote, pale by comparison. What for? Why? Ultimately, out of intense ignorance of the spiritual reality of the identity of the spirit soul, and a very, very tight bodily conception of life, deeply in the mode of passion and ignorance. So, what is the chapter? Swayambhuva Manu advises Dhruva Maharaj. Dhruva Maharaj was the king, and when his brother was unceremoniously killed, it was his duty to take revenge against the Yakshas from the Himalayas. Also, as explained in the first verse here without a purport, that Dhruva Maharaj's long-standing, how should we say, dissatisfaction, anger, feeling of hurt from his stepmother, Saruchi, who is the true mother of Uttam, who came forth with such envy of Dhruva Maharaj, saying that he's just trying to climb onto the lap of his father as a 5-year-old boy, and she sees that as symbolic that he wants to take the throne of his father, saying that this is a hope against hope that will never come true. If you even want to think of taking the actual throne, you first have to die and give up your body and take birth from my womb. And of course, these words ultimately drove him to follow the instructions of his real mother, who's credited as being his Vartma Pradaksha Guru, Siniti, to go to the forest and seek out the association of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who alone can solve all of one's problems and give one ultimate solace. So here, because Dhruva Maharaj is a great devotee, and he was offended by his stepmother, she died in this situation. A very powerful example of becoming upset, transcendently angry, is exhibited by our own founder, Acharya, spiritual master, His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada, many, many times, and is wanting to preach, expand the Krishna consciousness movement, and defend the right of Lord Chaitanya's Krishna consciousness movement to exist and expand against all demoniac threats. So, in other words, becoming angry and envious and wanting to start and to fight for the sake of defending the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his devotees' ambitions, their mission, and their devotional service is correct. But then again, how to go about it. Here we're seeing Dhruv Maharaj. He's shooting bows and arrows, he's severing heads, and we'll see as this chapter progresses how intense that fight was. There's one verse where Dhruv Maharaj, after being overwhelmed by the mystic illusions of the Yakshas, he became, for the time being, bewildered in his mind, and he lost his enthusiasm. And then great sages appeared and gave him auspicious encouragement. You could say the association of devotees. And then he took up his very special bow and arrow weapon, and was called the Narayan Astra. And Prabhupada writes, and that when he did that and set it forth, it immediately dispelled the mystic illusions of the Yakshas. I don't think it is in this fight. I think it is in another. Oh, it's the demon Hiranyaksha. You know, stool, urine, and blood is raining from the sky, and like vicious, naked hooligan demons riding on horseback, shouting cruel and savage slogans appeared. Very frightening. A typical day in New York City, right? And Prabhupada likens that we have been given a very nice weapon in this age to dispel the illusion of Maya. It is called the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. There is a chapter in Srila Prabhupada Leela Amrita, Volume 6, perhaps or arguably one of the most intense fights for the sake of the Krishna consciousness movement that Prabhupada saw and how should we say, like a general directing the movements of his soldiers, oversaw, and his entire chapter, chant Hare Krishna and fight. And it also cuts very personally to home because it was the New York anti-cult case. And Prabhupada became very, very angry at the accusation of the so-called deprogrammers. And there was a court case, a New York court case that would, we see these days when there's a court case in New York, drags on for years and years and years and years and years and years and years. But this court case, I believe in just one day, it was settled and thrown out, with given a resounding victory to the devotees. New York Times, March 18th, 1977. The Hare Krishna movement was called a bona fide religion yesterday by the New York City High Court Justice, who threw out. It didn't go to trial. It wasn't like a jury trial and all the back and forth drama, which you see big trials last for 3 or 4 months or something. Against the officials of the movement of, quote, illegal imprisonment. And the so-called, and the devotees who were being named for being imprisoned, they were above the age of 18. Can we say that anybody here is being falsely imprisoned? Raise your hand. Is everybody here over the age of 18? Yes. Okay. And attempted extortion. The charge had been preferred by an angry parent that his son, as well as another devotee, had been held by the movement illegally and that they had been brainwashed. The entire and basic issue before the court, said the justice, in dismissing the charges, quote, is whether the 2 alleged victims in this case and the defendants will be allowed to practice the religion of their choice And this must be answered with a resounding affirmative, said Mr. Justice John Leahy. When Prabhupada heard this and heard the justice's name, he said, God bless you for such a decision. Who knows where this justice is now, some 48 years later. Maybe he's born in the movement. Maybe he's, 48 years ago? He could be in his mid-30s. He could be one of the important devotees in this movement. Who knows? Prabhupada was he was joyous. The Hare Krishna movement is a bona fide religion and roots in India that go back thousands of years. It behooves the two names of the devotees to follow the tenets of that faith, and their inalienable right to do so will not be trampled upon. Many other nice words to say. Yeah. And Prabhupada's response, my mission is now successful. So, the acquirement of the 55th Street Temple, Prabhupada's Manhattan skyscraper, beacon of light to the entire world, the triumphant Rath Yatra with 3 huge carts down the most important street in the most important city in the world. Prabhupada came to New York City alone. Like he said, I came like a vagabond I came. And now, with huge media coverage, thousands of initiated disciples, and thousands of more admirers and followers, he's riding down in triumph on Fifth Avenue. Millionaires Row, that's 120 years ago, now Billionaires Row. And Prabhupada included or considered this court case, and it is a bona fide religion, as part of his complete success, of his entire effort. I was loitering alone in the street, carrying books. Nobody cared. At the end of the chapter, it will not be possible to assist you. Prabhupada living on West 72nd Street, his attempt to acquire a very nice building, which is still there, and remind everybody, put it on the ISKCON to-do list, acquire 143 West 72nd Street, which is in the heart of the Upper West Side Business District, still. Very good neighborhood, very good location. Prabhupada, the building is lying vacant now for 2 years for lease. And Prabhupada wanted this place, and he tried very hard, writing everybody and anybody that he could think could help. Ultimately, no one did. And that chapter concludes, seeing him from a distance, a lone figure wandering Manhattan streets, just like so many other lone figures, a foreigner whose visa had almost run out. At this juncture, it was not clear if New Yorkers would take seriously that a pure devotee was in their midst. And Prabhupada, he was understood to be a great fighter throughout his entire life. That he was the leader of his group was why one of his best friends, Narendranath Malik, decided that we have to get the opinion of our friend, Abhay Charan. What do you think of this sadhu, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati? When Srila Prabhupada gave his what to speak of affirmation. And I said, yeah, he's a good sadhu. I was like, wow, he was blown away. Right? You know, the leader of the group. Yeah, right. But blown away and just completely astounded and actually admitting I've been defeated by a superior personality and not being like, oh, you know, you got humiliated. No, he rejoiced in it. I had never been defeated before. But this defeat was not a defeat. It was an immense gain. I liked being defeated. So the way things were arranged by the transcendental order of the Parampara, Srila Prabhupada was seemingly a junior godbrother. He was not part of the, what to speak of the internal workings of his spiritual master's mission. He wasn't even a early disciple or founding member. And that distinction, or let's just say prejudice, can't think of a more softer word, remained intact all the way through the entire lifespan of the association of Prabhupada and his godbrothers, into old age. Yes. So just before Srila Prabhupada took sannyas, he's living in Vrindavan. He left his family. Old age is coming. He doesn't have very much money, if at all. And on one of those years, on his spiritual master's disappearance day, it had been some 20 years since his spiritual master had left, and he's trying to follow the order that was given to him. Preach this movement to those not converted. We think that Prabhupada was, yes, he was instructed, preach in English, but the greater instruction, which was written in the last letter exchange with Srila Prabhupada and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, I think that you should push our movement amongst those who are not conversant with the language of the already established members. That means everybody who can't speak Bengali and Oriyan and Hindi and maybe some South Indian languages. That was the extent of the Gaudiya Math at the time. The Gaudiya Math had been undone by its leaders, and everyone else had scattered like leaves in a storm. It was an unspeakable loss. Can everybody sit in such a way that I can see your faces? Yes, thank you. I don't have a disease, so you don't have to be so far away, I'm a pretty healthy person, It was an old story how the big sannyasis had disregarded their spiritual master's instructions and had intrigued, disputed, litigated, violent party factions, false leaders claiming to the world to be world acharya, And which party had been right? No, both had been wrong, all wrong, because the Gaudiya Math had disintegrated. Now there were dozens of little mats and no preaching. You have to be very, very, very careful that Prabhupada is understood to be the universal guru for everyone in ISKCON. In generational disciplic succession, of course, that is understood, but one has to have the proper ability to see everything in the proper context, or what's the word that I'm looking for? And Prabhupada is the founder of Acharya. As early as 1970, when different disciples who had been in India for various reasons, like perhaps maybe avoiding the draft in Vietnam, and had gone to India, and hearing from some of Prabhupada's godbrothers, particularly the more envious ones, or the more proud ones, that Prabhupada had instructed on all publications, is Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. When some of the books were published without founder Acharya, and even some just removed his sannyas title, just saying A.C. Bhaktivedanta, in Los Angeles, 1970. Prabhupada immediately understood where the disease came from and how it had spread. So when we all put Prabhupada in the center, no matter who one is initiated by in ISKCON, in other words, that they're coming in line from Srila Prabhupada, whether his disciple or second generational disciple, this will make it very, very easy for all of us to associate together as we need to associate with each other as cousin brothers or nephews and uncles, however, and see Prabhupada's mission as one. Not develop little separate groups. We're right, you're wrong. When Prabhupada wanted to take sannyas, he approached who was then the legal holder of what was considered the crown jewel and original temple of the Gaudiya Math, the Sri Chaitanya Math in Mayapur. And Srila Prabhupada, who had nothing to do with all the infighting, had completely stayed separate for all these years. This is 1959. This is 22, 23 years after Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. This personality said, the first thing you need to do, so Prabhupada is being falsely accused, this, which you've neglected to do for all these years, is to come and take shelter of Sri Chaitanya. You have to take shelter of me, basically. Those who are against this principle to date are acting illogically. And you can come and be with us, and we have airy, well-lit rooms. There'll be no inconvenience. Probably he's living in the Bamsi Gopalji temple. And he had a beautiful, we have a nice roof upstairs, he had a nice rooftop, and Prabhupada's view was the Keshi-Ghat Yugalakishore dome and the full span of the Yamuna River. Prabhupada said, airy, well-lit room, I already have that in Vrindavan. I already have that here. Why should I go to where you know? And over time, when we observe you and see that, you've adjusted, and then you bow down to us, then we'll think about sannyas. As for publications, well, publishing books and going to the West, first we have to see what is the need of the society. And no one should act independently. And Prabhupada was like, and then, of course, his very friendly godbrother, who actually at the time of the dissolution of the Gaudiya Math, with two of his most close godbrothers, that was Srila Siddhar Maharaj and Keshav Maharaj, they formed the society Vedanta Samiti in Sita Banerjee Lane in Calcutta, and just they had their own kind of friendly staying away from all the fighting and all of the heaviness. Dozens of little mats and no preaching, no real preaching as before, when he as Simaguru had cast fear into the Mayavadis. It's explained how the demons have taken birth in Kali Yuga as bogus gurus and Mayavadis. That is how they're fighting now. There's always animosity between the demigods and the demons. Always. Between the Suras and the Asuras. They take different incarnations. Where Prabhupada was very keen to train us all up how to defeat impersonalism and voidism and the so-called even more modern Mayavadis, like dressing as sadhus. That's rare. But how are they dressed now? As so-called scientists and scholars. And led an army of young, powerful preachers to march throughout India and the world. And the greatest sufferers of the Gaudiya Math's dissolution, and here's the key to get upset. This is the right reason to get upset. Who has suffered the most? The people. The non-devotees, who had little hope of being delivered from the batterings of Maya. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had begun a spiritual revolution, but that revolution had now been overthrown by Maya. The scattered particles of the Gaudiya Math had settled quietly into self-satisfied, insular, almost impotent units, and it was the people in general who suffered. Abai groped after memories of his spiritual master. He felt secure in his own relationship, that it was intact and continuing, yet he felt helpless. So many years earlier, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, repeatedly in different occasions, he will do everything himself. When the time is right, it is best he remain outside your company. Because Prabhupada's incredible Vyasyatmika Buddh here, incredible purity, one-pointed determination was unmatched. So that he solely and wholly got the credit. Lord Chaitanya protected him. Even though Prabhupada tried to engage his contemporary godbrothers, even after achieving substantial success, they did not come forward. One time, in an Indian lecture, it was in Madras. I just heard the devotee Shravananda, who was down there with Mahamsa preaching, said they're not so, in South India, they don't so much understand Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So he's saying, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, if he's Krishna, he could spread, if he wanted to, he could have spread the chanting of Hare Krishna and the Hare Krishna movement all over the world. It's like a challenge to Srila Prabhupada, an open assembly, and Prabhupada just retorted right back, yes, he left the credit, he left the task for me so I could get the credit. He was diligently pursuing his spiritual master's order to preach in English, yet without his spiritual master's physical presence, he felt small and very much alone. Lamenting, he composed Viraha Astakam. Look at some. O Srila Prabhupada, you are always compassionate toward the suffering jiva souls. On this occasion of your separation, I see only dejection. An unlimited ocean of mercy, cutting an illusion. Nityananda distributed the ocean of love of God. The Jati Gosai, that's the caste birthright Brahmins. Stop that stream. But coming yourself, Lord, you revealed this illusion. And sometimes when Srila Prabhupada himself was challenged by birthright caste Goswamis or those holding that conception, Prabhupada would be very much incensed and would soundly defeat them, becoming greatly transcendently angry, always defending his disciples. One Pandal, I believe it was, very early on. It started in October 1970 when all the devotees went over Bombay, and there was on the beach there, Sadhu Samaj. And the organizers, all these different sadhus, bearded yogis sitting on stage. I believe Giriraj Swami tells the story. You could look at the video following Srila Prabhupada. They didn't allow or want Prabhupada's disciples to sit on the stage. And Prabhupada said, if they don't sit on the stage, I will not sit on the stage. They're just as much sadhus, if not better, than all these sadhus here. On the strength of Lord Chaitanya's order, you sent all of your servants door to door as gurus. He was preaching everywhere, from the sea to the Himalayas. Now in your absence, everything is in darkness. Without Lord Chaitanya's message, there is just confusion. Seeing this, all the Vaishnava feel pangs of separation. The conditioned souls are all in darkness once again. They are searching for peace, but are dying in an ocean of anxiety. So this was a poem, and he composed it, and his friendly godbrother Keshava Maharaj published it in one of their publications, periodicals called Gaudiya Patrika. Just after this, I believe this was the third time, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta appeared to Prabhupada in a dream, beckoning him, come take sannyas. And shortly after that, as we celebrated just a couple of days ago, on the Purnima, Prabhupada did take sannyas. Now, a couple of years later, in February 1961, this is the Avirbhav, Vyas Puja, appearance day of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, there was a gathering of godbrothers in Vrindavan, and Prabhupada composed a speech, which he read in front of his assembled godbrothers. In honor of their spiritual master, some of the godbrothers had gathered, offered flowers before his picture, and held congregational chanting in the temple. But Bhaktivedanta Swami, he's been a sannyasi now for just less than a year and a half, thought that they should be doing much more than that. They should be planning and executing the worldwide preaching mission. Instead, they were a gathering of independent individuals, each with his own small idea, each maintaining a small center or living at his center, but with no world programs, not even a program for India. Most of them had no plans or vision beyond their own bodily maintenance. Some who had fought bitterly were again, at least on speaking terms, and feared that any sudden organizational attempts now might simply stir up old animosities. Amongst his godbrothers, Bhaktivedanta Swami was a junior sannyasi. Although a recognized writer and editor, he had no temple or followers. Yet. I'm saying yet. Yet he knew he was trying to follow Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. He saw himself helpless and alone against the vast forces of Maya. His godbrothers were not an army united against Maya's forces, but were more like apathetic monks, growing old, holding on to religious principles and rituals devoid of life. How could they gather to worship their spiritual master without distressfully admitting their failure and, in the spirit of better late than never, try to rectify it? So Srila Prabhupada wrote an offering more like an explosion than a eulogy, and humbly placed it before his godbrothers. Even now, my godbrothers, you return here on the order of our master, and together we engage in this puja. But simply a festival of flowers and fruits does not constitute worship. The one who serves the message of the Guru really worships him. Oh, shame, my dear brothers, aren't you embarrassed? In the manner of businessmen, you increase your disciples. Our master said to preach, let the neophytes remain inside the temples and simply ring the bells. But just take a good look at the terrible situation that has arisen. Everyone has become a sense enjoyer and has given up preaching. From the seas across the earth, penetrate the universal shell, come together and preach this Krishna consciousness movement. Then our master's service will be in proper order. Make your promise today. Give up all your politics and diplomacy. So, becoming angry, but for a purpose, and with the inseparable part of that anger, the motivation to do shreyasi, ultimate good. It is not like the anger of egotistical, narcissistic persons who will go at any length to establish for their own preyasi immediate sense gratification. So, as we practice our devotional service, our sadhana bhakti on various levels or in various categories, one of Srila Prabhupada's premier book distributors, female devotee, asked Srila Prabhupada that we're supposed to be very humble at the temple with the devotees, but then we can't really be like that when we're out distributing books, at the Port Authority bus terminal, Penn Station, Grand Central, there's other places, LAX, Chicago, Oh Hare Krishna Airport. And Prabhupada gave the wonderful instruction, be a lamb at home and a lion on the chase. So the methodologies and the seemingly contradictory, but actually simultaneously multivaried feelings and techniques going on in a devotee can be more understood as we practice and gain experience in our, as we vowed at initiation, lifelong career in Krishna consciousness. Thank you. Hare Krishna. The verse once again. When Dhruva Maharaj heard of the killing of his brother, Uttam, by the Yakshas in the Himalayan mountains, Being overwhelmed with lamentation and anger, he got on his chariot and went out for victory over the city of the Yakshas, Alakapuri. All glories to his divine grace, Srila Prabhupada, Grantaraj, Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Hare Krishna. Verse 10 tomorrow onwards.